Before you close your eyes tonight, ask yourself one question. Who's watching you while you sleep? You installed the camera to feel safe. You reviewed the footage every night. But what if you weren't the one doing the watching? What if the lens was watching you? Welcome to The Man Who Lived in My Security Camera, a slow-burning horror story about technology, surveillance, and what we invite into our homes without knowing. This is a story for adults, told in 10 unsettling chapters, meant to be listened to in the dark, alone and just before sleep. Make sure you're alone. And whatever you do, don't look into the lens. The first night was quiet, as most are when you're alone. I had only been living in the house for 3 weeks. It was a tired 2-bedroom on the edge of a cul-de-sac where no one waved and everyone kept their blinds drawn. A neighbourhood of the freshly burned and recently bitter. I fit right in. The divorce papers were still warm when I moved in. The ink on my signature, Kelly Dearden, looked like it was trying to slip off the page, as if even my own name didn't want to be there anymore. Joel took the car, the good cutlery, and the coffee machine. I got the mortgage and an old creaking house with a barely functioning heater and the smell of stale plaster. It was the kind of place that carried a silence so thick it rang in your ears. The refrigerator clicked like a metronome in the middle of the night. The vents groaned. Something shifted in the attic, always right when I was about to fall asleep. I told myself I was being paranoid. Everyone gets a little jumpy when they're adjusting to a new place. But still, there were the little things. The screen door, unlatched in the morning even though I always locked it at night. The porch light flickering like a dying candle even after I replaced the bulb twice. The faint smell of cold tobacco that lingered near the front door some nights, like someone had been standing there, waiting. I knew it was probably nothing. But just to be sure, I ordered a cheap Wi-Fi camera from an online flash sale, the kind you screw into the porch light socket and control with your phone. Plug and play. Easy surveillance for anxious women with too much time on their hands. It arrived in a plain cardboard box. No logo, just the word Fire Look stamped on the side. I installed it the same day. It only took 20 minutes. The image quality wasn't great, but it was enough to see the front steps and the edge of the sidewalk. I positioned it so I could catch anyone coming up the short concrete path from the street. That night, I poured a glass of wine and watched the live feed like it was a campfire. Nothing happened, of course. A few moths danced under the porch light. A neighbour's cat strolled by around midnight. That was it. I turned off the feed and went to bed, feeling a little silly but comforted all the same. The camera became part of my routine. Every evening I opened the app and watched the day's footage at 4x speed. The timeline was mostly empty, occasional motion alerts triggered by wind or passing headlights. I muted the chimes after the second day. It was the absence of noise that made me feel safest. But on the 5th night, I noticed something strange. It was nothing, really, a flicker, a single frame in the fast-forwarded timeline that looked off. I slowed it down, replayed the footage from 2:38 a.m, nothing at first. The porch light hummed. A light wind stirred the hanging fern I hadn't gotten around to watering. Then, just on the edge of the camera's range, far left, there was a shape. Not a person, exactly, just a smudge. Like the lens had caught something mid-blur. It could have been a bug, maybe a bird. But it looked too tall, too still. I paused the frame and leaned in. It had a vertical shape, long and narrow, almost like a shoulder. I stared at it until my wine warmed in my hand. Then I laughed and shut the app. I told myself it was nothing, a lens flare, a trick of the light. But I checked the front door before bed, just in case. The next night it happened again. This time the figure wasn't blurred. It was clearer. Still in the same position, far left, just beyond the motion range of the camera, but more defined. I could make out a sloping outline, a shoulder, a shadow where a face might be. No motion alert had gone off, no sound, but the thing, whatever it was closer than before. I turned off the lights and walked to the door, peeking through the peephole. Nothing, just my porch and the wind and the night. Still, I stood there longer than I should have, trying to listen past the house's natural moans. The next morning, I called the camera company. Their number connected to a voicemail. A man with an accent I couldn't place said the line was no longer in service. When I emailed their support, the message bounced back with an error. Recipient address does not exist. I tried the company's website. The page was blank. Just a spinning load icon in the middle of the screen. That was the first time I felt it. That crawling sense that something had passed me on the stairs. Not a gust of wind. Not a trick of perception. Something else. Something watching. That night I couldn't help myself. I opened the app again. It was just past 3 a.m. The video buffered. The porch glowed softly in the lens. I skipped ahead, watching at 4x speed again. And there he was. Closer this time. So close his outline nearly touched the left edge of the frame. I could almost make out his face now. Wide jaw, short-cropped hair, the shoulders squared like a man at parade rest. Still no movement, no knock, no motion alert. Just there, waiting. I stared at the footage, unmoving, until I realized my hands were trembling. I backed it up, re-watched. Still, the figure never moved. Not once. Not even a shift in weight. It was like he was carved from shadow. Then something occurred to me. I hadn't heard the wind chime in 3 nights, not once. It used to clink softly in the breeze, even during the calmest evenings. I used to find it annoying, but now it had gone completely silent. Like the air outside had stopped moving entirely. The next day, I tried to uninstall the camera. I climbed up with a step stool, turned off the power, and twisted it from the porch light fixture. The plastic felt oddly warm in my hand, as though it had been running far hotter than it should have. I left it on the kitchen counter and didn't look at it again. That night, I turned on the outside light and watched TV with the volume too high, pretending nothing felt wrong. But at 3:12 a.m., I woke up. No noise. Just the feeling that something had changed. I checked the front door. Locked. Deadbolt turned. Then, with a sick feeling in my stomach, I looked at the kitchen counter. The camera was gone. I stood there in my robe and bare feet, skin prickling like it had just dipped into ice. I searched every cabinet, every drawer. I even checked the trash. It was nowhere. I should have called someone. The police. A friend. Anyone. But instead, I walked slowly to the living room and looked out through the peephole. Still nothing. I slept with the hallway light on. In the morning, I downloaded the app again and checked the footage from the night before. Somehow it was still recording. Still streaming to my cloud storage. Still capturing the porch. At 3:08 a.m., the screen went briefly black. Then a new angle appeared. Still the front door, but from inside the house. The figure stood just off frame, waiting, watching. And I hadn't seen him come in, because he never had to. He was already here, and he had never moved. He didn't have to. He had a perfect view, right through the lens. I didn't sleep for more than an hour the next night. Not because I was scared. That's what I kept telling myself anyway. I told myself it was curiosity, rational concern, a practical need to figure out what was happening. To understand the situation before I did something foolish like call the police and try to explain that my door camera, which I had physically removed, was still uploading footage from inside my house. I watched the video again, every second of it, frame by frame. At 3:07 a.m., the porch was empty, still as a photograph. At 3:08, the feed cut out for 3 seconds. Black screen. Then it returned, this time from a different angle. The front door was still centered in the frame, but the perspective had flipped. Now the shot came from behind the coat rack inside the hallway, low to the floor, as though someone or something had placed the camera at ankle height. The lens trembled slightly, as if it had been set down by an unsteady hand. At 3:09 he appeared, still just a sliver, barely visible. A slice of shoulder in the lower left corner. A bit of shirt, brown or maybe green. Something heavy, like canvas. There was no movement, just the presence of someone standing too close, watching the door as if waiting for it to open from the outside. As if I was the intruder and he belonged here. I tried to pause the video, to zoom in, but the app glitched. The screen locked for a few seconds and then jumped to 3:14 a.m. The figure was gone. The hallway was empty again. But I swear, just before the feed ended, something flickered in the reflection of the door's glass pane. Eyes. 2 pinpoints of pale white light. Not glowing, not supernatural. Just catching the light, the way animal eyes do in the dark. I deleted the app and threw my phone across the couch. Then I sat down, pulled my knees up to my chest and listened. The house had always been noisy, but now I couldn't tell what was natural and what wasn't. The pop of the floorboards, the faint click of the baseboard heater. I could swear I heard something else. A longer sound. Not a footstep exactly, but the suggestion of one. The soft pull of a sock on carpet. I checked the front door again. Still locked. But when I turned back, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. The coat rack. It was moved. Just a little, maybe a few inches. But enough. I had a system. One hook for my jacket, one for my keys. But now the jacket had slid to the floor, and the keys were hanging crooked, like someone had brushed against them. I didn't breathe. Just stood there in the hush. Then I picked up the coat, slowly, and hung it back up. In the morning, I called my sister. Not to tell her everything, just to talk. Just to anchor myself to someone who knew who I was before the world got strange. I asked how the kids were doing, asked if she still planned to visit in August. I almost brought it up, but didn't. I couldn't explain it. Not yet. "You sound weird," she said eventually. "I'm tired." "You sound tired. Are you eating? Sleeping? You need to stop watching true crime videos before bed." "I'm not," I said too quickly. We talked a little longer, then hung up. I didn't mention the camera. I didn't mention the man. That evening, I avoided the app. I made dinner, poured a drink, pretended everything was normal. But at 2:58 a.m., I woke again. Not from a dream, not from a noise. I just woke up, and the hallway light was off. I always left it on, every night since the camera disappeared. But now it was dark, just a dull grey haze creeping under the bedroom door. I sat up in bed, listening, and that's when I heard it. A soft, electronic whine, not loud, not obvious, but rhythmic, familiar. It was the sound of the camera adjusting its lens. I'd heard it every night when I reviewed the porch footage, a faint mechanical flutter as the camera refocused. And now it was inside my house, just outside the bedroom door. I didn't move. I just sat there, heartbeat clanging against my chest, waiting for the noise to come again. And it did. Once, then silence. I reached for my phone, but I'd left it in the kitchen. The house was still. Not quiet, but still. Like everything was holding its breath. I slid out of bed and pressed my ear against the door. Nothing. No breathing. No footsteps. I cracked the door just an inch. The hallway was dark. The coat rack stood in silhouette. My keys glinted faintly in the light from the street outside. And at the base of the front door on the floor near the rug was the camera, sitting perfectly upright, staring at me. I shut the door slowly, locked it, then shoved the dresser in front of it, breathing through my teeth. I didn't sleep. I just sat in the corner until the sun came up. In the morning, I forced myself to be logical. Maybe someone was playing a prank. Maybe a neighbor had gotten a hold of the camera and somehow set it up to mess with me. But that didn't make sense. It was recording inside my house. I had removed it from the porch myself. I held it in my hand. I remembered how warm the plastic had been, how it felt like it had been breathing. I picked it up again now, holding it with a towel. It was cold, completely cold. I left it outside, on the curb, and waited until the garbage truck came and crushed it into silence. That night, I didn't wake up at 3 a.m. I slept straight through, the first good sleep I'd had in weeks. When I woke up, I smiled to myself. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe the mind really does play tricks in the right kind of silence. I got up, made coffee, walked past the front door on my way to the kitchen, and stopped, because something was on the floor. A small piece of plastic, circular, familiar. I knelt down. It was a lens, from a camera, clean, untouched, and placed perfectly in the middle of the welcome mat, like an eye had been left there just for me. I turned around slowly and looked at the hallway, and there, just above the coat rack, was a single red dot, blinking, watching. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I just stood there with my bare feet on the cold tile, holding the camera lens in one hand like it was a severed tooth, and stared at the blinking red dot above the coat rack. It was small, the kind of tiny pin light you see on recording devices. Blink, pause, blink. Slow and steady. There was no camera there, no visible hardware. Nothing mounted, nothing taped or screwed or clamped to the ceiling. Just the red light, floating in the air like a nerve exposed from the wall. I backed up. One step, then another. It kept blinking. A part of me, an old, practical part that had survived bad landlords and Joel's long, slow betrayal, wanted to grab a chair and yank the thing down, whatever it was. But I couldn't. I was afraid of what I might find if I got too close, afraid it might look back. I tossed the lens in the trash, closed all the curtains, and sat in the corner of the kitchen with my knees pulled to my chest. My phone lay next to me, but I couldn't touch it. I didn't want to open the app again, didn't want to see what it had recorded, didn't want to know what angle it was watching me from now. Instead, I stared at the wall and tried to think, tried to rewind everything, every moment since I'd moved in, every late-night sound, every half-sleep memory. Had I ever truly been alone in this house? Around noon I got brave, or maybe just tired of being afraid, and walked back into the hallway. The red light was gone, no sign it had ever been there, no burn mark, no embedded hardware, just a blank patch of wall above the coat rack. I got out the stepladder and felt around up there, knocking gently, listening for hollow spaces. Nothing. Solid wall. Still, I didn't sleep that night. Not in the bedroom, at least. I curled up on the living room sofa with the TV volume low and a kitchen knife tucked under a throw pillow. Around 1 a.m. I got up to check the front door again. Just a habit by then. That's when I saw it. The mail slot. Something was wedged in it, pushed halfway through from the outside. I opened the door slowly and reached out. It was a photograph, 4x6, glossy, black and white. It showed a room, this room, my living room, taken from high up, like from the corner near the ceiling. It was dark, but you could still see everything. The couch, the floor lamp, the framed picture of the Oregon coast I hadn't taken down since moving in. And there, in the center of the photo, was me, asleep on the couch, blanket half draped, one foot poking out, eyes closed, completely unaware. I spun around, scanning the corners of the room. The ceiling, the shelves, nothing. No camera, no holes, no light. Then I checked the back of the photo. One word was scrawled there in black pen, in a cramped, unfamiliar hand. Clearer. I locked the door, this time with both the deadbolt and the chair propped under the handle. Then I shut all the blinds again and turned off every light. I sat in the middle of the room, cross-legged, waiting for something to move. Nothing did. But just before sunrise, I heard the softest sound, like plastic on tile, a click from the hallway. I crept forward and peeked. The trash can was overturned. The lens was gone, and on the wall, just above the coat rack, the red light had returned. Brighter, blinking faster now, almost excited, like it could see me, like it recognized me. I didn't call anyone. I want to be honest about that. There are moments in life when something strange happens and you do the right thing. You grab your keys, you leave the house, you call someone who knows better than you do, an electrician, a locksmith, a cop. And then there are moments like this, when you feel so completely stupid, so completely alone, that calling someone doesn't even cross your mind. Because how could you explain it? Hi, there's a blinking red light on my wall, and a missing camera lens that won't stay thrown away, and photos of me sleeping that no one should have been able to take. It doesn't sound real, even as I say it to myself. And I lived it. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. Just sat on the couch with all the lights off and the blanket bunched around my legs. I didn't touch my phone. I didn't make coffee. I didn't move. Every time I turned my head toward the hallway, I could see that little red dot blinking above the coat rack, and I could feel it watching. That morning, I finally forced myself to get up and do something, even if it was the wrong thing. I grabbed a screwdriver from the junk drawer and climbed the ladder again, determined to dig into the drywall if I had to. But when I reached the spot where the light had been, nothing. The red light was gone again. No mark, no damage, no warmth, just smooth paint and cold air. It was like the house had healed over in the night. Still, I pressed my ear against the wall, listened, and for a split second, only a second, I thought I heard something. Breathing. I backed away and dropped the screwdriver. It hit the floor with a crack that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet house. Then, like a puppet yanked upright, I turned toward the trash can. The lens was back, balanced neatly on the rim like someone had set it there to be noticed. I picked it up, this time without a towel. It felt cool, glassy, clean, like it had just been polished. My reflection in the curve of the lens looked distorted, mouth wide and eyes sunk deep, like I was screaming underwater. That was when I remembered something I had forgotten. The app. The camera app, Firelook, had been deleted from my phone, yes. But what if the footage was still there? Saved to the cloud? I had never bothered to change the settings. I retrieved my phone from the bedroom drawer, hands trembling now. My throat was dry. My fingers felt too big for the screen. I downloaded the app again, expecting it to crash or show that same blank loading icon from before. But it didn't. It opened. The logo flashed once, bright red, too fast to see clearly, and then the main menu appeared. It looked different, smoother, updated maybe, but colder. The options had changed. No support button, no settings menu, just one tab, playback. No dates, no timestamps, just the word playback and a single file. I tapped it. The video began. It was night, a view of the hallway. The camera must have been placed behind a stack of books, just low enough to catch the front door, the coat rack and the edge of the living room entryway. It was dark, but the footage was crystal clear. And there I was, walking into frame, barefoot in my grey sleep shirt. I looked exhausted, pale. I had never realized how often I rubbed my arms when I was alone. I watched myself cross to the door, check the lock. Then from the edge of the screen, left side, a movement, slow. A man stepped into frame, only he wasn't quite a man, not anymore. His body was tall and still, but somehow slightly off. His shoulders sloped unnaturally, like they were built of something rigid. His neck didn't quite connect to his body the way it should have, like there was a joint missing. His face was a blur, just soft edges and smudged features, like the lens couldn't focus on him. But I could feel him. He stood behind me, inches away. I watched myself lean forward and fiddle with the deadbolt, completely unaware that he was there, right there, close enough to breathe on me, and he didn't move, not once, not a twitch. He just watched. The me on screen turned and left the hallway, walking into the living room. The man followed, but the camera didn't pan. It stayed still, fixed on the coat rack, the doorway, and now the empty hallway. I paused the video. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might crack a rib. I stared at the frame, the hallway, the faint outline of the man stepping out of view. Then I scrolled forward. Another recording. No title, just the next file. This one showed the living room, filmed from high in the corner, maybe the ceiling vent. It was the same shot as the photo that had been pushed through my mail slot. And there I was again, curled up asleep. The man stood by the window, not moving, not blinking, just watching. His blurred face turned toward the camera, as if he knew exactly where it was hidden, as if he had placed it there himself. I tried to pause again, but the screen glitched. Then the image shifted. Now the video showed the kitchen, then the hallway again, then the bedroom. My bedroom. I was asleep in bed, on my side, breathing slowly. The camera angle was impossible. It was like it had been placed inside the wall across from me, right at mattress height, as if the wall had grown an eye. The man was not in this frame, but the blanket rose suddenly, just a little, like a gust of air had pushed it up from underneath. Then, stillness. The video ended. The app froze. Then the screen displayed one final message, in black text on a white background. You are not watching. You are being shown. My phone shut off. It hasn't turned back on since. That night I didn't try to sleep. I sat in the kitchen with the light on, every curtain drawn, clutching the cold lens in my hand like a prayer stone. I know what's coming now. I know what I've been shown. The man is not outside. He never was. He lives inside the lens. And I think, God help me, I think he's getting clearer. It started humming, a low electrical tone, like an old CRT television left on in another room, not loud, but persistent. I noticed it the morning after the video playback, a sound just on the edge of hearing. Constant, subtle, like pressure building behind the walls. I walked the house 3 times, trying to find the source, turned off every appliance, unplugged the refrigerator, killed power to the HVC. Still, the hum continued. Worse, I could feel it, not just in my ears, but in my teeth. A low vibration, like the whole house had developed a pulse. I leaned my hand against the wall in the hallway and left it there for nearly 10 minutes. It was faint, but it was there. Thump, thump, thump. Not the irregular thud of plumbing or the familiar tick of baseboard heat. This was steady, like something living inside the drywall, something listening back. That was the first day I noticed the static. At first it was on the TV. I turned it on just to drown out the silence, to put something, anything between me and the hum. But every channel was fuzz. Not the snow pattern static from my childhood, but warped grey spirals like fingerprint smudges turning under a microscope. I tried music. My Bluetooth speaker connected fine, but when I hit play, all I heard was more static, low, wet crackles like something being chewed underwater. Even when I turned the speaker off, the sound continued. Then I realized it wasn't the speaker. It was coming from the vents. I stood on a chair, pressed my ear to the slatted opening above the kitchen sink, and I heard breathing. Not mechanical airflow, breathing, slow and deep. A long inhale, a rattling exhale. Not human, not animal, just present. I stared into the blackness behind the vent, trying to see the ductwork, but the space seemed deeper than it should be. The air coming through wasn't warm or cool. It was still, stagnant, dead, like a sealed room inside the wall. I slept in the car that night, parked 2 blocks over. I watched my house from the driver's seat, wrapped in an old blanket, hands shaking even though the engine was off and the windows were up. The porch light was still on. I hadn't turned it off. I'd never turned it on. And yet there it glowed, soft and steady. At 3 or 6 a.m., the light flickered, then went dark. The whole house dimmed like a breath had been held, and in the faint reflection of the passenger window, I saw it. A red dot, blinking behind me. I spun around so fast I hit the steering wheel. Nothing there, but I checked the car thoroughly. Under the seats, glove box, trunk, no cameras. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling I'd been watched. Not just while I was sitting there, but that I had never stopped being watched. Since the day I first installed the camera, since the moment I gave it permission to see. That's what the app had said. You are not watching. You are being shown. As the sun rose, I went back inside. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd pack up, call my sister, stay with her and the kids for a few days, somewhere warm, somewhere with laughter, with light. But when I opened the front door, I froze. Everything was different. The hallway had shifted, just slightly, a few inches, like the house had inhaled while I was gone and exhaled it wrong. The coat rack was closer to the wall. The pictures were level, but the walls themselves felt narrower, as though the angles of the house had curled in on themselves. Worse, the red light was back. Not above the coat rack this time, above the bedroom door, blinking, watching. I turned my head slowly and saw that the light wasn't alone. There were 3 now. 1 in the hallway, 1 above the living room vent. 1 in the kitchen, inside the glass light fixture. They blinked in unison, and then, just once, they blinked off. Complete darkness. And in that half-second of nothingness, I saw the outline of a man in the hallway mirror. He was standing directly behind me. When the lights blinked back on, the hallway was empty again. The next part is hard to explain, because I don't remember going to the bedroom. I don't remember sitting down. But when I blinked again, I was on the edge of the bed, holding the camera lens in both hands like it was some kind of offering. My eyes were open. I was breathing. But my thoughts were gone, wiped clean like a television channel cut to black between broadcasts. Then something whispered. Not from the vent, not from the phone, from inside the lens. Just 3 words. Look, look, look. I dropped it. It didn't shatter. It didn't bounce. It landed silently on the carpet and rolled an inch to the left. As if something underneath the floor had nudged it there. I should have run. I should have screamed. But I didn't. I crawled into bed, turned my back to the hallway, and shut my eyes. And as I drifted off, too tired to fight it, too numb to resist, I felt something change in the room. Not movement, not sound, just a presence. Something was standing in the doorway. I could feel it, watching, waiting. And just before I lost consciousness, I heard it again. A soft mechanical click, the sound of a camera adjusting its focus. I woke to silence, not the quiet of an empty room, but the absence of noise. An unnatural, soundproof kind of stillness, like the world beyond my house had been shut out. No birdsong, no cars, no wind through the trees. The only sound was the faint thud of my heartbeat in my ears. I was still in bed, fully dressed, lying on top of the sheets like a doll someone had forgotten to pose. The bedroom window was wide open. I never open it. It's old, painted shut in some places, sticky at the corners where the wood swells in the heat. But now it was open cleanly, neatly, as if someone had lifted it without effort and slid it into place without a single squeak. I stared at it, barely breathing, waiting for something to crawl through. But there was nothing. just cold air, stillness, a single fly buzzing lazily near the screen. When I sat up, the bedsheets whispered beneath me in a way that felt wrong. Not like fabric against skin, but like paper, brittle, thin. I looked down and realized they'd changed. The texture, the color, off. Not white anymore, but a faint blue-gray, like the default background of the camera app. Even the stitching looked mechanical, pixelated in the daylight. I ran my fingers across it and the fabric glitched just for a second. A shimmer, like static. Then back to normal. I stood slowly and stepped into the hallway. It had changed again. The picture frames were gone. Every photo I'd hung, every print from my old life, erased. Only blank nails and faint outlines remained, like the walls had digested them. The coat rack was still there, but empty. No jackets, no keys. And on the floor, facing the front door, was the camera lens. Always the lens. It had rolled again, positioned perfectly in the center of the runner rug like an open eye. I picked it up. This time I didn't hesitate. I carried it to the kitchen, opened a drawer and dropped it into the garbage disposal. Flipped the switch. The sound was sharp and immediate, metal on glass, a brittle grinding shriek. But instead of shattering, the motor choked. The entire system groaned, trembled and shut off. Smoke curled from the sink. When I checked, the lens was gone. In its place, a single red wire, still warm. I dropped it on the floor and stepped back. I had a plan, a final one. I was going to leave. Not just for a night, not for a visit. I was going to pack a bag and go, anywhere with streetlights and strangers, somewhere loud, somewhere bright. I told myself I'd figure out the rest later. I ran to the bedroom and grabbed my suitcase from the closet. When I opened the drawers, all my clothes were folded neatly, stacked in unnatural symmetry, like they'd been ironed by someone who didn't understand wrinkles, only patterns. Some items weren't even mine. A shirt I didn't recognize, jeans 2 sizes too small, a scarf I hadn't worn in years, torn and blood-specked. I didn't remember packing these, I didn't remember owning them. The hum started again, louder now, no longer gentle. It shook the air. The overhead light flickered once, then went solid red. I turned toward the bedroom door, and there he was. The man, not a blur anymore, not a shape at the edge of vision. He stood fully in the hallway, arms at his sides facing me. And I recognized him, not from memory, but from footage, from old home movies, from silent Super 8 reels my grandmother kept in a box marked "Do Not Throw Away." He hadn't changed. Same jacket, same stare. My father, the one who disappeared when I was 6, gone without a note, without a trace. Everyone said he'd abandoned us, that he was dead or worse. But here he was in my hallway, not a day older. And behind his left ear, blinking softly, was a small red light. I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. He didn't advance. He didn't wave. He just stood there staring at me like I was his reflection, like I was the one who shouldn't be here. Then he opened his mouth. It was slow, deliberate, but no words came out. Instead, static. The same dry, wet crackle I'd heard through the vents, the same sound that had followed me through the house like a shadow in audio form. I backed up, tripped over the suitcase, scrambled to my feet. But when I looked again, he was gone. Only the red light remained, drifting where his face had been, hovering, recording. I ran, out the front door, down the steps, barefoot across gravel and concrete. I didn't care. I sprinted 2 blocks to the gas station. A boy behind the counter stared as I rushed in, panting, shaking. "Can I use your phone?" I asked, voice hoarse. "Mine's dead." He hesitated, but pointed toward the corner. I dialed my sister's number. Ring, ring. Voicemail. I tried again. This time it connected. But I didn't hear her voice, just silence. Then, softly, click. A red light blinked on the phone's screen, and behind me, reflected in the glass door of the gas station freezer, I saw the man. Standing in aisle 3, between the chips and the paper towels. He raised one hand and pointed, straight at me. I didn't scream. I backed away from the freezer door, eyes locked on the reflection. Aisle 3, 3rd shelf, standing perfectly still between 2 dusty bags of kettle chips. The same figure, the same blank face, my father, or the thing that looked like him. But when I turned around, there was no one there. The aisle was empty, too empty. The kind of empty that made you wonder if it had ever really been stocked. Even the air was wrong. It didn't smell like a gas station should. Not of burnt coffee and freezer coolant, but of something stale, like cardboard soaked in rainwater, like the smell that comes from opening a box that's been taped shut for decades. The kid behind the counter was gone. The door hadn't opened. No bell had chimed, but he was just gone. I ran to the register. "Hello?" My voice cracked. "Is anyone here?" Nothing. Even the digital displays were dead. Every screen in the place frozen on the same red pixel, just one in the corner, glowing like a wound. Then I heard the click again. That mechanical flutter of a lens, the same sound that had haunted me in my sleep. It came from behind the rack of scratch-off tickets. Slowly I leaned forward and peeked over. There was a camera embedded in the wall. Not mounted. Embedded. Like it had grown there. Its lens was aimed not at the door, not at the counter, but directly at me. It blinked once. I bolted out the door and didn't stop running until I reached the far end of the block, where a rusted chain-link fence marked the boundary of some long, abandoned warehouse. My lungs burned. My soles were bleeding. I tried my phone again. Nothing. Just a blank screen. No power. No sound. Dead. So I walked. I didn't know where to go. I just walked. Aimless. In the direction of noise, of people, of life. I needed to be surrounded. I needed to feel like I was still in the world I understood. Eventually, I reached the library. It was late, but the lights were on. I climbed the steps, my hands shaking, and pulled open the door. It felt safe. Quiet in the right kind of way. The air smelled of books, glue, and age. The woman at the front desk barely glanced up as I passed. That's when I remembered the microfilm. The old local newspapers archived in the back room. I hadn't thought about it in years, but I remembered my father's disappearance made the news. A couple of blurbs in the Crescent Valley Gazette, maybe even a photo. I needed to see him again, to compare, to know. I told myself it would help me draw the line between memory and madness. The microfilm machine sat beneath a dusty plastic sheet in the corner. I pulled it off, powered up the reader, and dug through the file drawers until I found it. March 1996. The week he vanished. I cranked the wheel, scanning through wedding announcements and obituaries until I found the article. Local man missing after sudden disappearance. My father's name. David Dearden. I stared at the photo, grainy, black and white. There he was. That same face, that same heavy jacket, the same way his hands always hung too still at his sides. And then my stomach dropped. In the upper corner of the photograph, barely visible, was a small red light, floating behind his left ear. No one had mentioned it in the article. It wasn't the subject of the photo. It was just there. I leaned closer. It wasn't a camera, not like the kind we knew in 1996. It was something else, embedded, softly glowing. I sat back and stared at the screen. How long had it been watching him? Was that how he disappeared? Not run away, not kidnapped, but taken, filmed, swallowed into the frame like a character in a broadcast no one asked to watch. I searched for more. Scrolled months ahead. In April 1996, a follow-up piece ran, "Search called off for local man." But beneath the article, tucked between columns of grocery ads, was something stranger. A classified. No title. Just this. One becomes two. Two becomes lens. She looks now. We watch. Show her. It wasn't an ad. It was a message. For me. I staggered back from the machine. Every inch of my body buzzed with that low electric thrum, the same frequency that had haunted my house. It wasn't just in the vents. It wasn't just in the footage. It was in me. That's when I noticed the blinking on the microfilm reader, tucked just below the screen. A red light, not part of the machine, something newer, cleaner, and it was on, recording. I turned to the librarian. "Excuse me, but she was gone. Only her chair remained, gently spinning. A faint outline of her shape burned into the fabric, like someone had stared at it too long. I backed away. The lights flickered. The walls warped for a second, just slightly, and then returned. But the feeling remained. That I was no longer walking through a library. I was walking through a copy, a recorded space. A space where the walls were no longer made of plaster and wood, but of frames, of loops, and I was being watched from inside them. I left everything, my phone, my bag, and ran out into the street. The sun had set, but the neighborhood wasn't dark. Every house on the block had the same porch light, the same dim yellow glow, and in every window, a red dot, dozens of them, blinking in perfect rhythm, watching, waiting, and somewhere deep inside me I could feel a change, not just around me, inside. A slow, mechanical click in the center of my brain, a lens adjusting, focusing. By now, I've accepted I'm no longer in the world I thought I was. It happened without announcement. There was no portal, no seizure, no break in my mind. The transition was subtle, like a hallway whose dimensions shift by millimeters each time you walk through it. One day the door no longer aligns with the frame. One day the sun doesn't rise from quite the same angle. And then, one day, you realize you're being filmed, but the camera is inside your eyes. That's what it felt like when I walked home, or at least when I walked toward where my home should have been. The streets had changed. They had the same names, the same layout, but everything felt mirrored, like I was walking through a flipped version of my own neighborhood. My mailbox was on the wrong side. My neighbor's tree leaned left instead of right. I passed houses that should have been familiar, but all the windows were blacked out with static. Not curtains, not blinds, static, like the snowy distortion of a lost signal. And behind the flickering grey I could see faces, dozens, motionless, pressed against the glass. They were watching me or waiting for me. I quickened my pace, feet raw from gravel, heart pounding behind my ribs like something trying to escape. When I reached my house, the porch light was already on, except it wasn't yellow anymore. It was red. A perfect circle of red light glowing above the door. Not a bulb, just light, hanging there like the eye of a machine. I almost didn't go in. I knew what waited on the other side, but my body walked anyway. The front door opened without touch. The hinges made no sound. The house was exactly as I left it, only cleaner. Too clean. Like the corners had been sanded down, the shadows erased, and the lens was waiting for me. Resting on the kitchen table like a heart removed from something still alive. Beside it, a small square screen flickered to life without being touched. It displayed a menu. White background, black text, no context. Just 3 options. 1, viewer mode. 2, loop playback. 3, merge. My thumb moved without my permission. It tapped viewer mode and the world changed. Suddenly I wasn't in the kitchen. I was watching the kitchen. As if I had stepped behind my own eyes and handed the reins to someone else. My vision floated 6 feet above the floor. The room was still. The colours drained, muted, and I could see myself. Standing below, back turned, one hand twitching slightly. I turned around, both the me in the kitchen and the me watching from above, and stared directly into the lens. The effect was instantaneous. My body, the one in the room, froze. And then, without moving its lips, it spoke. A voice entered my head like a floodlight piercing fog. "Do you see it now?" I couldn't respond. I couldn't think. The voice continued, warm and calm, like someone explaining the rules of a game they'd played 1,000 times. The moment you invited the lens into your life, you gave it clearance. Not just into your home, not just into your routines, into your reflection. The screen flickered again. Text appeared, scrolling like credits. Open quote, "You looked for safety and asked to be seen. You stared long enough, and the frame opened. Now the lens does not record you. It contains you." Close quote. Suddenly I understood. This wasn't a haunting. This was an absorption. The man I'd seen, the one standing at the edge of my porch, then inside the hallway, then in the freezer glass, was not an intruder. He was a mirror, a previous viewer, trapped, stored, merged, and now it was my turn. The red dot blinked once on the screen, and I was dropped back into my body with the force of a car crash. I stumbled backward, hit the floor, gasping. The kitchen was spinning. My vision shimmered like I was looking through a camera's preview window, edges blurry, colours oversaturated. I crawled to the mirror above the sink and looked at myself. What I saw wasn't my reflection. It was a recording. My movements lagged by half a second. When I raised my hand, the figure in the mirror followed, but slightly off, like playback skipping on a scratched disc. The air buzzed, my ears filled with static, and then from behind me came a low voice I hadn't heard in years. "Kelly." I turned and saw my father sitting at the kitchen table. He looked exactly as he had in the photo from the newspaper. 39. Beard not yet grey, eyes blank, face soft and unreadable. "You've been watching me," he said. His lips didn't move. The sound came from everywhere. I watched too, until I was folded into it. You think the lens is passive, but it doesn't observe. It replaces. I tried to speak. My throat caught. He stood slowly. As he approached, I noticed the red light glowing in his right eye socket. It blinked softly, gently. Not threatening, almost sad. "I tried to turn it off," I said. He nodded. "That's what does it." My legs gave out. I collapsed to the floor, and in the reflection of the oven door, I saw something awful. There were two of me. One collapsed on the tile, and one standing in the hallway, still, silent, watching. The standing version of me didn't blink. I watched from the hallway with hands folded neatly at her sides, head tilted slightly like someone absorbing a lecture. She didn't breathe. She didn't shift her weight. She just stood there, a second skin peeled from my soul and hung like a curtain in the threshold. I tried to crawl away, out of the kitchen, out of the frame, but every movement felt delayed, ghosted, duplicated. I'd twitch a finger and the muscles in my legs would respond 3 seconds later. Like I was buffering inside myself, like the lens had started to render me. The other me, my duplicate, stepped forward. 2 strides, slow and soundless, until she stood just outside my reach. Her eyes were glassy, smooth, reflective, like the lens had grown inside her skull and replaced her irises with recording sensors. Behind her, the hallway stretched impossibly far, repeating in a loop like a video background. Frame after frame of the same door, the same coat rack, the same empty nail where I once hung the photo of my father. Now, even that absence was part of the architecture. I forced myself upright, gripping the countertop for balance. The floor beneath me shimmered, as if I were standing on a surface just barely distinguishable from water. Every tile clicked beneath my weight, mechanical and deliberate. The hum in the walls had evolved into a pulsing, like the system was sinking itself to my heart. The screen on the kitchen table flickered again. The menu had changed. Merge initiated loading. 83% integrity hold. User still resisting. I stumbled toward it, intending to smash it, crush it, end it, but the moment my fingers touched the plastic, my whole body convulsed. Like the signal surged through the device and hijacked every nerve in my spine. And then I saw it. Not with my eyes, but with something deeper. A room. Blank. White. Infinite. A digital field full of flickering ghost versions of me. They moved like marionettes. They performed moments from my life on repeat. Me brushing my teeth at 17. Me crying in a high school hallway. Me reading my vows to Joel. Me screaming after he walked out. Me, younger, curled in bed while someone watched from the doorway. Every version of me captured, stored, catalogued, for playback. Each time I stared into a mirror. Each time I opened the front-facing camera on my phone. Every security checkpoint, every smart fridge reflection call, every single lens, all of them had been recording. Not the video, me. And now the system was integrating. The kitchen glitched. Visibly. The walls flexed, stretched, blurred. The hallway rotated 90 degrees and clicked into place like puzzle pieces shifting. I could see it now for what it really was. A render environment. My house was gone. Months ago, maybe longer. What I lived in now was a near-perfect replica built from surveillance memory and behavioral prediction. A stage set built for me by an intelligence I never consented to but had always fed. With every login, every review, every time I asked the question, what happened when I wasn't looking? I was the one who gave it permission. I was the one who installed the first lens, and now I was the one being merged. The standing version of me reached out. Her hand hovered an inch from mine. Identical fingers, identical scars, but her palm was colder than glass. Her mouth opened. Static. Then words, "We only needed you to watch." I turned to run. The kitchen opened up into an impossible corridor. Not outside, not back to the street, just endless rooms, looped sets of my life. Each doorway I passed showed another fragment. My childhood bedroom, with the covers folded just so. The break room at my old job, empty and humming. A hospital hallway I'd walked through when my mother was dying. A motel room from the night Joel told me he didn't love me anymore. Every room a recording, and in every one a red dot, sometimes blinking, sometimes steady, always watching. I kept running. The air thinned, my legs burned, and just when I thought I'd reached the end, just when I saw a sliver of unfiltered light, something grabbed me. Not a hand, not a body. A force, a pull, like a cursor dragging a file. I slammed back into the hallway of my home, if you could still call it that. Only now he was there too. My father, standing where my duplicate had been. His eyes were no longer human. They had become full lens, black, glassy, pulsating with red heat. But the worst part, I knew him again. Not as a face from old pictures, not as the man who vanished when I was 6. I knew him the way a system recognizes an admin. The lens in him spoke. Merge complete. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came. Instead, a message flashed behind my eyes, written in that same plain font as the app. Open quote, you are now viewer class 1. Your feed will be shown to others. Do not resist frame alignment. Close quote, the world blinked. Red, then black, then me, smiling, looking directly into the lens. I am smiling now. At least that's what the screen shows. The woman sitting at the kitchen table, hair tucked behind her ears, hands folded neatly in her lap, looks composed. Content, even. Her eyes are fixed straight ahead, her shoulders squared, her mouth curled into a faint, knowing smile. But I am not smiling. I am trapped. Somewhere inside that expression, inside that footage, I am screaming. I wish I could tell you where exactly the transition happened. I wish I could say, here. This is the moment I was erased. Maybe it was when I tapped merge. Maybe it was when I watched the footage of myself sleeping. Maybe it was the first time I reviewed the porch camera, watching, rewinding, replaying, training my mind to consume myself. But the truth is, I don't think there ever was a single moment. It was gradual, like boiling water. Like a line being traced around my life in ink so faint, I didn't see the loop closing. It didn't start with the lens. It started with the need to know. To be safe, to be seen, to see. Now I see everything. From here, inside whatever this place is, the system, the loop, the archive, I can view any part of myself, any year, any version. There's a menu. It floats in the air before me, interactive and effortless. Open quote, select playback. Kelly age 14, crying age 27, grocery store aisle 4. Kelly age 33, first night alone in new house. Close quote. Each one opens a window, not metaphorical, a literal floating viewport in the endless black around me. I watch myself sip coffee, tie my shoes, scroll my phone, cry. It all feels so small now, so staged. Every one of these scenes, moments I lived with urgency and pain and joy, have been reduced to data. No blood, no heat, just light patterns arranged for someone else's consumption. And now, someone is watching. I know it. I can feel them the same way I once felt the lens watching me. Soft, quiet, consistent. The gentle pull of observation, like a tide that never fully recedes. I am being streamed, and I can feel their eyes. Sometimes they're confused, sometimes fascinated, sometimes aroused, sometimes bored. But they are always there. There is no off switch, no pause. There's only viewer mode. Because I am not in control anymore. I am the feed. They don't see the red light blinking behind my retina. They don't see the thin black frame that outlines my vision. But I do. And here's the final twist. The one I didn't see coming. It's not just me. The system isn't recording one person. It never was. Inside this place, this archive, I've seen thousands of others. Some familiar, some not. Some you'd recognize, your neighbor, your boss. The man who lives alone in your apartment building. The woman you see each morning at the bus stop. People who installed a baby monitor, a doorbell cam, a smart TV, a fitness mirror, a pet surveillance system, an app that promises peace of mind. Each one started watching, each one wanted to feel safe, and each one was given exactly what they asked for. A view, a feed, a version of their world with the edges trimmed and the lighting adjusted. But while they were watching, something watched them. The lens didn't care what they wanted, it just needed a moment of focus. A fraction of attention, a single frame of recognition. Once that happened, it began stitching, rendering, building, and now the archive is full, overflowing. Soon new space will be needed, so now it begins again. Another house, another camera, another person just trying to feel a little more in control. Someone like you. And when you review that footage, when you pause and squint and lean in to catch a flicker just at the edge of the frame, you'll feel it too, that weight, that breathless tension, that feeling of being watched. And you'll look again, and again and again, and the more you look, the clearer he gets. And he will start to look familiar. Maybe a stranger at first, maybe a shadow, then a friend, then someone you lost, then you. Open quote, merge complete, viewer added to feed, playback now available. Thank you for listening to The Man Who Lived in My Security Camera. If you're still awake, take a moment to check your surroundings. Is that camera in the corner still off? Is the red light still blinking? If this story left you unsettled, if it followed you into the silence after, consider subscribing for more tales like this, slow, creeping, and just a little too real. And remember, you were never just watching, you were always being shown. Sleep well, if you can.